Hello and welcome along to today's webinar, Avoid an HR Headache This Christmas, an Employer's Guide to the Festive Season. My name is Rachel Lamsley and I'm the Senior Employment Law Advisor here at Ellis Whittam. I can't actually believe that it's this time of year again when we're having to consider the pitfalls that the season brings. Today I'm going to help you navigate through the Christmas party season and help you confidently manage any issues that come your way. We help our clients take the headache out of the Christmas season. So today I hope to do the same for you. So for those who are unfamiliar with Ellis Whittam, we provide high quality, fixed fee employment law and health and safety advice. We employ qualified solicitors and health and safety advisors who develop one-to-one relationships with our clients as we provide you with a named advisor to help you along your HR and health and safety journey. We don't just advise, we provide hands-on support. And we've got a range of additional services that employers can take advantage of. We're currently supporting more than 17,500 UK employers, and we really are experts in our field. We also have some pretty impressive client satisfaction rates, something that we're really proud of here at EW. So what are we going to take a look at today? Well, in a nutshell, it's how to take the headache out of the Christmas season. We'll look at too much fun and not enough work and the impact that that has on your business, as well as how to deal with the Christmas party and cleaning up the mess when everything goes wrong. So let's get started then. It's probably the most common issue that we'll see over the festive season. Everyone's out with their friends, having a bit too much fun and too much of a good time, and it may result in them struggling to get to work the next day on time. I think the starting point when we're talking about lateness is to consider that there's no Christmas magic when it comes to dealing with HR issues. We need to consider how we've dealt with this in the past. There's no need to deal with things more leniently or more harshly. It's actually about dealing with all matters relating to HR fairly and consistently. Okay, so how do you deal with lateness then? If this is the first time offence and otherwise this employee is reliable, I deal with this fairly informally. I'd ask the employee into an informal meeting, confirm that we've identified that they've been late and get the reasons from them as to why that actually happened. We can explain that during this time of year the business is busy and so we need to see an immediate improvement in that. You can explain that repeated lateness is taken seriously and can result in disciplinary action. This should hopefully spur them on into turning up for work on time. In another scenario though, this could be the last lateness in a long line of problem with timekeeping, and so it may be more appropriate to take this forward to a formal disciplinary hearing with the right to be accompanied where one of the outcomes is a potential first written warning. I think it's important to remember not to turn a blind eye to lateness. Letting an issue become bigger and bigger will not allow us to jump straight to a dismissal when it gets out of hand. We should get a handle on this early on and make sure that we're following your own disciplinary procedure, moving those employees through the warnings as we go. Other concerns in respect of lateness is, well, what to do about pay. If you are going to make any deductions from pay for the time that they're not actually in work, make sure that you have a clear deductions from wages clause within your contract that deals with overpayments. Have a policy within your handbook in respect of lateness and how this will be tackled during the festive season, and don't feel obliged to treat this more leniently simply because it's Christmas time. Now, moving then on to hangovers and the headaches that they bring. An issue with an employee having a hangover at work is that their productivity goes through the floor and they are simply coasting along, willing the clock to strike 5. In cases such as this, I'd advise my clients to get the employee into an informal meeting and explain that this sort of behaviour is not acceptable and that they must get back to work immediately. The more serious consideration, however, is if they're actually still under the influence of alcohol whilst at work. Whilst they may feel fine, the employee could still be over the limit. This could have some real serious ramifications, perhaps if they operate machinery or drive as part of their role. In these cases, you may wish to consider investigating this and suspending the employee. It's very important to have a drug and alcohol policy in situations such as these. Within your policy, you can include drug and alcohol testing, which you can ask the employee to submit to. Whilst they don't need to give consent, you can take from that an adverse inference which can go against them in a disciplinary process. A word of warning on this, however. Whilst you may treat being under the influence of drugs and alcohol at work as a gross misconduct offence, a scaffolding company found out the hard way that your process is key to a fair dismissal. In this particular case, Mr. Rennie went to the pub over lunch and returned clearly worse for wear. This was the day before the staff were due to finish for the Christmas holidays. The company decided to dismiss Mr. Rennie, but waited to tell him this information until he'd sobered up, which happened to be after the Christmas holidays, and he actually learned this information through the gossip mill that he'd been sacked. Mr. Rennie's claim was successful in the employment tribunal, as his employer had actually failed to follow a fair process. It did, however, cut Mr. Rennie's compensation by 75%. The key to remember here is just because it's gross misconduct doesn't mean that we can fail to follow a fair process when dismissing. Now, what about if they simply fail to turn up? Well, this can be quite a serious situation for some employers, and the starting point in cases such as these is to attempt to make contact with the employee to find out where they are. There could be a serious reason why they have been unable to make contact. If you fail to make contact with the employee and they've not followed your absence reporting procedure, then on their return, it might be necessary to consider disciplinary action for being absent without authorization and failing to follow the correct absence reporting. Something to consider here is if you have a policy of allowing staff to make last-minute requests for time off, we should really consider what impact that's going to have at this time of year. If you do have that policy, you may find that it's being abused over this Christmas period, and so it's best to have a clear policy on when staff can make requests for time off and what sort of notice they should be giving the employer. In the case of Stott and Next, Miss Stott arranged to attend a Christmas party for her husband, paid a deposit, all before she knew that she was needed to work that day. Miss Stott provided alternative days to work to her employer, but they weren't accepted, and Next, her employer, said that she would face disciplinary action for unauthorised absence if she didn't come to work, and this happened to be on Christmas Eve. Mrs. Stott decided not to attend work that day, and Next took the decision to dismiss her. Miss Stott claimed that her dismissal was unfair because she'd stated that she didn't realise that she was committing such a serious offence and was not warned by her employer that her failure to work on Christmas Eve was likely to result in her dismissal. Unsurprisingly, she was successful in her claim. Employers that know that they're going to need employees at specific times of year should, for the avoidance of any doubt, make provision for this in their contracts of employment and communicate this clearly to everyone in advance of the period of required working. Where an employee indicates in advance that he or she may take unauthorised absence during this period, it's vital that the employer warns him or her of the possible consequences. However, employers should be taking a sensible view of unauthorised absence. If an employee with a flawless record is dismissed for taking a single day's unauthorised leave, the employer actually risks a finding of unfair dismissal against them. Mrs. Stott in this case actually had an exemplary employee record and had no previous blemishes on this, and so all of that was taken into account when deciding if the claim was fair. Now, on to Secret Santa, who's arranging that in the workplace. We certainly do that here at Ellis Whittam, and it is a sorry state of affairs when employers need to concern themselves with the perils of Secret Santa, as it makes you think twice about whether you want this taking place at work. But there's no need to be a Grinch this year. You can still have a bit of fun. I think the easiest way for us to manage Secret Santa without ending up with a hefty grievance on your desk or discrimination tribunal claim is to set a limit on how much to spend and let staff know that they should be buying gifts that are appropriate and won't offend their colleagues. The last thing we want is Bill buying Rita from accounts £100 worth of Ann Summers kit that she opens in front of the entire office. This could easily result in a sexual harassment claim. Even when it comes to the joys of gift giving, we still need to be careful about bullying and harassment, discrimination, and the general embarrassment factor. Giving someone who doesn't drink for religious reasons a bottle of wine or purchasing some strong-smelling deodorant is not going to end in Christmas cheer. Also, what one person believes is funny, another person may not. Let's make this easy. Let's give a clear message to staff about what's appropriate and how much to spend, and that way we can at least avoid some awkward glances around the office when gifts are opened. So, dressing up then, and we all thought that was a little bit of fun as well. At this time of year, everybody gets a little excited about the mince pies and Father Christmas coming to town, and we may even ask one of our colleagues to don the red cloak and wear the white wig. But have we selected perhaps the older gentleman in the office who fits the bill for good old Santa? Well, Dow Jones Company ran into a bit of trouble with this when they allegedly forced a middle-aged man in payroll to dress up as Santa. Now, luckily, the tribunal did not agree that this was sex or age discrimination, but it is a timely reminder of how easily someone can be offended, and this could actually land you in front of a judge. There is an easy way to make sure that you don't land yourselves in front of that judge this year and still keep some of the festive cheer alive. Ask somebody to volunteer to dress up and to hand out those secret Santa presents. This way, you can keep everyone happy, including Santa's little helper. So, what are our top tips then in respect of the issues that we've discussed? Well, the starting point is to make sure that you've got policies and contracts that are up to date. Make sure your staff know how to deal with lateness and unauthorised absence. Also, make sure that you've communicated your disciplinary policy to staff so that they know what to consider as misconduct or perhaps gross misconduct. Set out clearly the expectations with any secret Santa and make sure that your contracts contain a deduction from wages clause. Do make sure that your managers know what they are doing and that they also follow your own internal policies when dealing with issues. The last thing you need is one manager dealing with matters more seriously than another. Finally, before taking any action, always take into account how you've dealt with incidents in the past. You don't want to be in a situation where we get landed in front of a judge explaining why on this occasion we treated this matter more seriously than perhaps in the past. So, on to religious diversity then. That is obviously a topic that comes with its own raft of potential issues. The biggest thing to remember when dealing with your Christmas party is that this is an extension of your workplace, and it's no good saying, well, it happened outside of working hours. On the contrary, the party is very much part of work and the environment, and employers can be on the hook for when things go wrong. So what that means is that an employer can be liable for the actions of their employees. If one employee discriminates against another, the employer can be liable for that. So, as I say, religious diversity plays a key role in our considerations when we have a Christmas party. So let's have a chat about that. Organisations will have people from all walks of life and from all different cultures and religions. Everyone should be invited to the Christmas party, regardless of their religion. But just remember, don't insist on them coming, as this has got to be a personal decision. If you're planning on having a meal, remember to cater for all dietary requirements. In terms of the venue, have this at a neutral venue or location, and perhaps keep the seasonal decoration to seasonal rather than religious images. Staff also need to be mindful of religious differences, and repeatedly asking if an employee wants a sausage roll when they know that they are Muslim is simply not going to be appropriate. Right, another thing to consider for us is, who knows, somebody who's met their partner perhaps at a Christmas works party. Well, I certainly do, and it's really no surprise that employers can't control who staff fall in love or in lust with. But what happens when all of this gets a little bit out of hand? Well, got a little bit of a case for you here. In the case of Nixon and Roscoe solicitors, it really all did become a bit of a saga. Nixon was said to be in a relationship with one of the solicitors, but at the Christmas party she was seen kissing the IT manager, and allegedly at the end of the evening they were seen leaving together and were said to have shared a hotel room. After the party, Miss Nixon went on holiday, had a period of sickness absence, and when she returned at the end of January, members of staff actually became aware that she was pregnant. On finding out, the HR manager made a suggestion about the paternity of the baby, and according to Miss Nixon, had also been gossiping and spreading rumours about her pregnancy. Miss Nixon asked to transfer to a different office, raised a grievance, and then ended up resigning. Miss Nixon brought an employment tribunal claim for sex and pregnancy discrimination, harassment, and constructive dismissal. Whilst initially the tribunal did not agree with Miss Nixon, on appeal, the Employment Appeals Tribunal overturned the findings made of sex and pregnancy discrimination and harassment. It said that the gossip was connected with the pregnancy, and it did constitute harassment. It also said that the failure to allow Miss Nixon to transfer to a different office was also sex and pregnancy discrimination. The Employment Appeals Tribunal upheld the tribunal's decision that Miss Nixon was constructively dismissed also. This case highlights how employers can be liable for their employees' actions following a Christmas party, and also demonstrates the need to deal with grievances properly and in a timely manner. So, just as we have no control over who kisses who under the mistletoe, we also have no control over how those employees handle their alcohol. Did the MD line the shots up at the bar and encourage some disorderly behaviour? Well, one of my favourite cases was in respect of the drunk employee who told her fellow colleagues that she preferred the company of her cats over those. Now, whilst that might have been true, it perhaps was not the most appropriate forum to have that discussion. One of the big concerns that we see come up at this time of year is how to deal with staff after a fight. Well, ZSL London Zoo had a very similar dilemma. This involved two zookeepers, Miss Westlake and Miss Sanders. Both women got into a fight at the Christmas party, and the catalyst appeared to be one's ex-boyfriend and the other's new boyfriend. Following the fight, Miss Westlake was dismissed as the zoo felt that the injuries she'd inflicted on Miss Sanders were very severe, and then they had a gut feeling it was her fault more than the others. The tribunal, though, did not agree. They said that without clear evidence about who started the fight, which ZSL didn't have, it was not reasonable to dismiss one and not the other. It would have been more appropriate to have dismissed both or given both final written warnings. It is a good reminder when dealing with these sorts of cases to conduct a reasonable investigation and treat staff in a fair and consistent manner. If you're going to treat them differently, make sure we have evidence to back that up. Just as an aside, there has been a case that came through in respect of a fight following a Christmas party. This case was actually heard in the High Court in respect of vicarious liability for damages rather than in the Employment Tribunal. The facts were that a director and an employee, amongst others, continued drinking into the wee hours of the morning following a Christmas party. During that time, a fight broke out, which actually resulted in a serious brain injury for the employee. The question that the judge needed to consider was whether the director was acting in the course or scope of his employment so as to make the company vicariously liable. Well, the judge decided that the company could have been liable if this had happened at the Christmas party itself. But as it happened after the party during a private drinking session, the company wasn't vicariously liable on this occasion. It is, however, a timely reminder that depending on the facts, the employer could easily be liable for actions such as these. Now, the next thing I wanted to discuss was bullying and harassment. And it's best to look at this in two ways. So, from a discrimination perspective, harassment is where, for a reason related to a relevant protected characteristic, for example, disability, marriage, civil partnership, age, sex, race, religion or belief, gender reassignment, a person is made to feel that they're being engaged in conduct that has the purpose of effect of creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating or offensive environment. So, some pretty serious stuff. But the reality is that any comments or jokes could be perceived to be harassment on the grounds of perhaps religion or sex. An example is where at a Christmas party, a woman was told that she needed a good man and that they wanted to try her out in bed amongst some other inappropriate comments. She also had her dress pulled down. She walked away with £10,000 at the employment tribunal. The other consideration is bullying more generally, which perhaps isn't discriminatory, but is generally hostile or humiliating. Being made to feel left out at the party or being made fun of can be the building blocks for a grievance in respect of bullying. And so make sure that everybody is aware of dignity at work and bullying and harassment policies, and that they're all up to date and communicated to staff and managers. Now, do your managers know how to deal with a tricky situation if they're caught in the corner by a disgruntled employee? What tends to happen at the Christmas party is that employees find the Dutch courage to raise issues with their managers, perhaps about their pay or position. What this can result in is a rather awkward conversation, whereby empty promises are made and we're lumbered with a breach of contract claim. The case I wanted to tell you about happened in exactly that way. A promise was made to a member of staff at the party, which was subsequently not fulfilled, and the employee brought a claim for breach of contract. The best way to deal with these situations? Well, let's explain to the employee that we're at a Christmas party, and it would be much better for everybody to have these conversations once we're back at work, so that we can properly address their concerns. This will give the manager the out and the exit from the conversation at the same time as reassuring the employee that we take their concerns seriously and that we'll be dealing with this back at work. Finally, perhaps the hottest topic around is social media. It is very likely that your staff will be putting up on Facebook their photos from the evening's events, which, as long as they're appropriate, isn't going to be an issue. I've had all sorts of photos sent to me over the years, bare bums on the photocopier to blown up dolls paraded around the office. However, whilst this all sounds like a lot of fun, what if the employee identifies their employer on their social media page? There are concerns when those photos are perhaps compromising and they could bring the company into disrepute. The best way to tackle this ahead of the party is to make sure that everybody is aware of your stance on social media. I'd advise that you have a clear policy on social media and that any post that could bring the company into disrepute can result in disciplinary action and will be treated as gross misconduct. We need to strike a balance here between having fun and protecting the legitimate business interests of the organisation. And this can be done with a policy which clearly sets out the company's position on this. My second top tip is to consider planning. Who are we inviting? What about partners, or is this really too much of an expense or hassle? What sort of party are you holding? Will you all just be popping down to the pub for a quick drink, or is it a more formal affair with dinner? Will you be putting on any alcohol, or is it just the first drink or perhaps an entire free bar? What are the risks involved in doing that? And don't forget to cater for those who don't drink. Also consider where you're holding the party. Has it got religious connotations? How do you plan on getting your staff home, for example? Will you be putting a minibus on or taxi? And are you expecting them to come into work the next day? Finally, have a think about when you're actually having the party. Is Christmas your busiest season, and so hold it in January when everybody perhaps has the blues? What about the cost differences in a Thursday, Friday or Saturday night? My third top tip is to prepare. We have to make sure that all of our staff have up-to-date policies and procedures communicated to them. So let's make sure your social media, disciplinary, grievance, dignity at work and bullying and harassment policies are bang up to date. Also, have your managers had the training that they need? Do they know what's expected of them? And do they know that they should be acting like a manager even at the party? Can they get themselves out of a sticky conversation with an unhappy member of staff? Do they know what the difference is between appropriate and inappropriate behaviour? We also need to make sure we know how to handle a situation when someone raises an issue with them. Do they tackle this there and then, or wait until they get back to work? And finally, do your staff know what's expected of them after the Christmas party as well as during? So this takes me to top tip 4, pre-warn. It is so important to send information out to staff that deals with respect and dignity, not drinking too much, employees' expected behaviour during the party, and that this is a work-related activity, not getting into arguments, getting home, as well as a number of other points. For example, last-minute annual leave, coming to work the next day, and what will happen if there is any unacceptable behaviour. The bottom line has got to be, let's be very, very clear with our employees and managers about the expectation in the Christmas period. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed having you on board. Hope you feel a little bit more confident now in tackling HR headaches that the season can bring. If you've got any questions, then do pop them in the questions box and we'd be more than happy to come back to you after the event. I hope you enjoy getting ready for your Christmas party as much as we are here at EW. Have a great day.